There's so many different tools that you can use in audio: compression, limiters, expanders, gates, all this stuff. I know it's really confusing, especially when I was getting started at first. I couldn't understand any of this. It was just a bunch of crazy jargon, a bunch of things that we would just slap into our projects because we thought it was doing us good. But ultimately, if we don't know how these tools work, then we don't know how to use them, and we don't know whether they're necessary or unnecessary. And one of the things that was really confusing to me were gates and expanders. So this is something I want to explain in this video, and hopefully I can explain it in a way where you can understand, because I know this was confusing for me. So firstly, we need to understand what all these dynamic tools are for. Compressors, limiters, gates, expander. What a compressor does is we set a threshold. Anything that goes above that threshold, some of the volume gets reduced. So if I set a threshold right here and this was my signal, what a compressor would do is if there's a certain amount of volume going above it, it'll push a certain amount down, not completely cutting everything off. With a limiter, that's exactly what that does. Everything that goes above this threshold, it gets completely cut off in volume. Now, a gate and expander is the complete opposite of what a compressor and a limiter is. Again, a compressor presses some of the volume down, a limiter cuts off everything above the threshold. Now, a gate and expander is the complete opposite. So instead of working above the threshold, it's working below the threshold. So if there's sounds that are below this threshold, what a gate does, it's like a limiter, but the opposite. Everything that's below the threshold gets completely cut off. It gets completely cut off so that there's no volume, so that it's only leaving what's above the threshold. Now, the expander, like a compressor, but the opposite, is that when there is a threshold, everything below the threshold gets reduced in volume more. So it doesn't cut it completely off like a gate. What it does is reduces the volume even more based on the setting that you've set. What does this even do? As you can see now, it has increased the amount of dynamic range that you have in your sound. What the dynamic range is the most quiet part to the loudest part. That is the range of dynamics. And as you can see now, what we've done is increase the range between the loudest and the quietest part. What we're doing is we're increasing the dynamic range, and what this does is it makes your song more exciting. Because if there's no contrast between your sounds, then it's really boring, right? If I drew this line right here, everything was completely the same volume, that's pretty boring. Whereas if we added little dips and things here to it, it becomes more exciting because there's lows and there's highs. So that's exactly what an expander is doing. It's increasing the range of dynamics so that you have a more exciting sound. Let's say it's drums, right? We're now decreasing the parts that are quiet. Let's say it's hi-hats, and we're increasing, well, we have a loud kick, and we're decreasing the parts that are quiet, like hi-hats. So it's less robotic and it sounds more human, it sounds more lively when there's that much more dynamic range. So again, real quick, what it does, an expander takes the sound below the threshold and compresses it down even more so that you increase the dynamic range, the loudest to quietest part. What a gate does is everything below this threshold gets completely zapped to zero. And again, a compressor is the complete opposite. So all the sound above the threshold gets pressed down a little bit depending on what you've set. Whereas a limiter is like a brick wall. Everything that is above the threshold gets completely squashed down to zero, therefore making it a limit, and nothing goes above that. So I hope that was useful for you. I hope that helped you understand what a gate does, what an expander does, maybe even what a compressor and a limiter does. If you found this helpful, hit the subscribe button below so that you can learn more about music production. And I also talk about the business side of things, how you can create a full-time business with your music production. And I'll see you in the next video.